This is the 12th lesson of the online lessons on Harper Lee's novel To Kill a Mockingbird. We'll be working through chapters 18 and 19 in this lesson, in which Tom Robinson is on trial for the alleged rape of Mayella. These online lessons have been created for the students of St. Patrick's CBC in Kimberley, South Africa, during the coronavirus pandemic. It is the policy of our English department to share lesson materials with anyone who can use them for free. In this way, we hope to foster a spirit of generosity within education circles, and we wish to pay forward some of our own good fortune. Please assist us by subscribing to the channel and forwarding the material to anyone else who is teaching or studying this American novel. We'll be reading 2 chapters this lesson, 18 and 19, starting on page 184 in the Heinemann Schools edition. If you have any interest in a legal career, then you should pay close attention to all of the components of the court case as portrayed in these 2 chapters. Mayella is the plaintiff. You will see that her evidence is unreliable. You might even feel some sympathy for her, as Atticus reveals some of her home circumstances to the court. Tom Robinson, the defendant, comes across as a decent, compassionate human being. Even though he is on trial for his life, he never loses his composure. He is a black man trapped in a white man's judicial system. Mr. Gilmer uses Tom's blackness against him. It's clear to us, the readers of the novel, that Tom's treatment in a court of law is unjust. It's a bitter irony that even in the very institution that is supposed to guarantee equality, Tom can never be equal to a poor white girl whose lies are obvious to everyone. Watch out for Dill's reaction to what he hears in the courtroom. The blatant racism makes him physically ill. Let's start with chapter 18. Mayella Violet Ewell, a young girl, walked to the witness stand. As she raised her hand and swore that the evidence she gave would be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help her God, she seemed somehow fragile looking. But when she sat facing us in the witness chair, she became what she was, a thick-bodied girl accustomed to strenuous labor. In Macomb County, it was easy to tell when someone bathed regularly as opposed to yearly libations. Mr. Ewell had a scalded look, as if an overnight soaking had deprived him of protective layers of dirt. His skin appeared to be sensitive to the elements. Mayella looked as if she tried to keep clean, and I was reminded of the row of red geraniums in the Ewell yard. Mr. Gilmer asked Mayella to tell the jury in her own words what happened on the evening of November 21st. Mayella sat silently. Where were you at dusk on that evening? On the porch? Which porch? Ain't but one, the front porch. What were you doing on the porch? Nothing. Just tell us what happened. You can do that, can't you? Mayella stared at him and burst into tears. She covered her mouth with her hands and sobbed. Judge Taylor let her cry for a while, and then he said, "That's enough now. Don't be afraid of anybody here as long as you tell the truth. All this is strange to you, I know, but you've nothing to be ashamed of and nothing to fear. What are you scared of?" Mayella said something behind her hands. What was that? Him, she sobbed, pointing at Atticus. Mr. Finch? I don't want him doing me like he done Papa, trying to make him out left-handed. How old are you? 19 and a half. Well, Mr. Finch has no idea of scaring you, and if he did, I'm here to stop him. That's one thing I'm sitting up here for. Now, you're a big girl, so you just sit up straight and tell us what happened to you. You can do that, can't you? I whispered to Jem. Has she got good sense? Can't tell yet. She's got enough sense to get the judge sorry for her, but she might be just, oh, I don't know. Well, sir, I was on the porch and he came along and you see there was this old schiffer robe in the yard Papa had brought in to chop up for kindling. Papa told me to do it while he was off in the woods, but I wasn't feeling strong enough then. So he came by. Who is he? Mayella pointed to Tom Robinson. I'll have to ask you to be more specific, please. The reporter can't put down gestures very well. That and yonder, Robinson. Then what happened? Well, I said, come here, boy, and bust up the schiffer robe for me. I got a nickel for you. He could have done it easy enough, he could. So he come in the yard, and I went in the house to get him the nickel, and I turned round, and 'fore I knew it, he was on me. Just run up behind me, he did. He got me round the neck, cussing me and saying dirt. I fought and hollered, but he had me round the neck. He hit me again and again. He chunked me on the floor and choked me and took advantage of me. Did you scream? Did you scream and fight back? Reckon I did. Hollered for all I was worth. Kicked and hollered loud as I could. And then what happened? I don't remember too good, but next thing I knew, Papa was in the room standing over me, hollering, who'd done it, who'd done it? And then I sort of fainted, and the next thing I knew, Mr. Tate was pulling me up off of the floor and leading me to the water bucket. You say you fought him off as hard as you could, fought him tooth and nail? I positively did. Are you positive that he took full advantage of you? Or he'd done what he was after? Well, that's all for the time being, but you stay there. I expect Big Bad Mr. Finch has some questions to ask you. State will not prejudice the witness against counsel for the defense, at least not at this time. Miss Mayella, this is Atticus speaking. I won't try to scare you for a while, not yet. Let's get acquainted. How old are you? Said I was 19, said it to the judge yonder. So you did, ma'am. You'll have to bear with me, Miss Mayella. I'm getting along and can't remember as well as I used to. I might ask you things you've already said before, but you'll give me an answer, won't you? I won't answer a word you say, long as you keep on mocking me. Ma'am? Long as you keep on making fun of me. Mr. Finch is not making fun of you. What's the matter with you? As long as he keeps on calling me ma'am and saying Miss Mayella, I don't have to take his sass. I ain't called upon to take it. Oh, that's just Mr. Finch's way. We've done business in this court for years and years, and Mr. Finch is always courteous to everybody. He's not trying to mock you. He's trying to be polite. That's just his way. Atticus, let's get on with these proceedings and let the record show that the witness has not been sassed, her views to the contrary. I wondered if anybody had ever called her ma'am or Miss Mayella in her life. Probably not, as she took offense to routine courtesy. What on earth was her life like? I soon found out. You say you're 19. How many sisters and brothers have you? 7. Are you the eldest? The oldest? Yes. How long has your mother been dead? Don't know. Long time. Did you ever go to school? Read and write good as Papa yonder. How long did you go to school? 2 year, 3 year, dunno. Slowly but surely I began to see the pattern of Atticus's questions. From questions that Mr. Gilmer did not deem sufficiently irrelevant or immaterial to object to, Atticus was quietly building up before the jury a picture of the Yule's home life. Skip the rest of that paragraph. Miss Mayella, a 19-year-old girl like you must have friends. Who are your friends? Friends? Yes. Don't you know anyone near your age or older or younger, boys and girls? Just ordinary friends? Are you making fun of me again, Mr. Finch? Do you love your father, Miss Mayella? Love him? What you mean? I mean, is he good to you? Is he easy to get along with? He does tolerable, except when nothing. I said he does tolerable. Except when he's drinking? asked Atticus so gently that Mayella nodded. Does he ever go after you? How you mean, when he's riled? Has he ever beaten you? Answer the question, Miss Mayella. My pa's never touched a hair of my head in my life. He never touched me. We've had a good visit, Miss Mayella, and I guess we'd better get to the case. You say you asked Tom Robinson to come chop up what was it? A schiffer robe, an old dresser full of drawers on one side. Was Tom Robinson well known to you? What do you mean? I mean, did you know who he was, where he lived? I knowed who he was. He passed the house every day. Was this the first time you asked him to come inside the fence? Mayella jumped slightly at the question. Yes, it was. Didn't you ever ask him to come inside the fence before? I did not. I certainly did not. One did not is enough. You never asked him to do odd jobs for you before? I might have. There were several black men around. Can you remember any other occasions? No. All right, now to what happened. You said Tom Robinson was behind you in the room when you turned around. That right? Yes. You said he got around you the neck, cussing and saying dirt. Is that right? That's right. You say he caught me and choked me and took advantage of me. Is that right? That's what I said. Do you remember him beating you about the face? You seem sure enough that he choked you. All this time you were fighting back. Remember, you kicked and hollered as loud as you could. Do you remember him beating you about the face? It's an easy question, Miss Mayella, so I'll try again. Do you remember him beating you about the face? No, I don't recollect if he hit me. I mean, yes, I do. He hit me. Was your last sentence your answer? Huh? Yes, I just don't remember. I just don't remember. It all happened so quick. Don't you cry, young woman. Oh, let her cry if she wants to, Judge. We've got all the time in the world. I'll answer any question you've got. Get me up here and mock me, will you? I'll answer any question you got. Well, that's fine. There's only a few more. Miss Mayella, not to be tedious, you've testified that the defendant hit you, grabbed you around the neck, choked you, and took advantage of you. I want you to be sure you have the right man. Will you identify the man who raped you? I will. That's him right yonder. Tom, stand up. Let Miss Mayella have a good long look at you. Is this the man, Miss Mayella? Tom Robinson's powerful shoulders rippled under his thin shirt. He rose to his feet and stood with his right hand on the back of his chair. He looked oddly off balance, but it wasn't from the way he was standing. His left arm was fully 12 inches shorter than his right and hung dead at his side. It ended in a small, shriveled hand, and from as far away as the balcony I could see that it was of no use to him. Scout! Scout, look, Reverend! He's crippled! He got it caught in a cotton gin. Caught it in Mr. Dolphus Raymond's cotton gin when he was a boy. Liked to bled to death. Tore all the muscles loose from his bones. Atticus said, Is this the man who raped you? It most certainly is. How? Mayella was raging. I don't know how he done it, but he had done it. I said it all happened so fast. Now, let's consider this calmly. Oh, sit down, Horace. He's done nothing of the sort. If anything, the witness is browbeating Atticus. That's in response to Mr. Gilmer's objection. Now, Miss Mayella, you've testified that the defendant choked and beat you. You didn't say that he sneaked up behind you and knocked you cold, but you turned around and there he was. Do you wish to reconsider any of your testimony? You want me to say something that didn't happen? No, ma'am. I want you to say something that did happen. Tell us once more, please. What happened? I told you what happened. You testified that you turned around and there he was. He choked you then? Yes. Then he released your throat and hit you? I said he did. He blacked your left eye with his right fist. I ducked and it glanced. That's what it did. I ducked and it glanced off. Mayella had finally seen the light. Well, you're becoming suddenly clear on this point. A while ago you couldn't remember too well, could you? I said he hit me. All right, he choked you, he hit you, then he raped you. That right? It most certainly is. Well, you're a strong girl. What were you doing all the time, just standing there? I told you I hollered and kicked and fought. All right, why didn't you run? I tried to. What kept you from? He slung me down, that's what he did. He slung me down and got on top of me. You were screaming all this time? I certainly was. Then why didn't the other children hear you? Where were they? At the dump? Where were they? Why didn't your screams make them come running? The dump's closer than the woods, isn't it? Or didn't you scream until you saw your father in the window? You didn't think to scream until then, did you? Did you scream first at your father instead of at Tom Robinson? Was that it? Who beat you up? Tom Robinson or your father? What did your father see in the window? The crime of rape or the best defense to it? Why don't you tell the truth, child? Didn't Bob Ewell beat you up? Suddenly, Mayella became articulate. I got something to say. Do you want to tell us what happened? I got something to say, and then I ain't going to say no more. That black man yonder took advantage of me, and if you fine, fancy gentlemen don't want to do nothing about it, then you're all yellow, stinking cowards, the lot of you. Your fancy airs don't come to nothing. Your mamming and Miss Mayellering don't come to nothing, Mr. Finch. And then she burst into real tears. When Mr. Gilmer told Judge Taylor that the state rested, Judge Taylor said, "It's time we all did. We'll take 10 minutes. And of course, as the readers, we understand very clearly that Mayella is lying, that Tom's crippled arm means he could not have inflicted the injuries that she is saying he did. And at the end of the chapter, just before chapter 19, Atticus says he will call one more witness, Tom Robinson. Chapter 19 is Tom's testimony. It starts on page 196 in the Heinemann edition. Tom Robinson reached around, ran his fingers under his left arm and lifted it. He guided his arm to the Bible, and his rubber-like left hand sought contact with the black binding. As he raised his right hand, the useless one slipped off the Bible and hit the clerk's table. He was trying again when Judge Taylor growled, "That'll do, Tom." Tom was 25 years of age. He was married with 3 children. He'd been in trouble with the law before. He once received 30 days for disorderly conduct. Well, it must have been disorderly. What did it consist of? I got in a fight with another man. He tried to cut me. Did he succeed? Yes, sir. A little, not enough to hurt. You see, Tom moved his left shoulder. Yes. You were both convicted? Yes, sir. I had to serve because I couldn't pay the fine. Other fellow paid his. And Dill leaned across me and asked Jem what Atticus was doing. Jem said Atticus was showing the jury that Tom had nothing to hide. Were you acquainted with Miss Mayella Violet Ewell? Yes, sir. I had to pass her place going to and from the field every day. Whose field? I picks for Mr. Link Diaz. Were you picking cotton in November? No, sir. I works in his yard fall and winter time. I works pretty steady for him all year round. He's got a lot of pecan trees and things. You say you had to pass the Ewell place to get to and from work. Is there any other way to go? No, sir. None's I know of. Tom, did she ever speak to you? Why, yes, sir. I'd tip my hat when I'd go by, and one day she asked me to come inside the fence and bust up a schiffer robe for her. When did she ask you to chop up the schiffer robe? Mr. Finch, it was way last spring. I remember it because it was chopping time and I had my hoe with me. I said I didn't have nothing but this hoe, but she said she had a hatchet. She gave me the hatchet and I broke up the schiffer robe. She said, I reckon I'll have to give you a nickel, won't I? And I said, no, ma'am, there ain't no charge. And then I went home. Mr. Finch, that was way last spring, way over a year ago. Did you ever go on the place again? Yes, sir. When? Well, I went lots of times. Under what circumstances? Please, sir. Why did you go inside the fence? Lots of times. Oh, she'd call me in, sir. Seemed like every time I passed by yonder, she'd have some little something for me to do, chopping kindling, toting water for her. She watered them red flowers every day. Were you paid for your services? No, sir, not after she offered me a nickel for the first time. I was glad to do it. Mr. Yule didn't seem to help her none, and neither did the children, and I knowed she'd have no nickels to spare. Where were the other children? Oh, they was always around all over the place. They'd watch me work, some of them. Some of them would sit in the window. Would Miss Mayella talk to you? Yes, sir. She talked to me. As Tom Robinson gave his testimony, it came to me that Mayella Ewell must have been the loneliest person in the world. She was even lonelier than Boo Radley, who hadn't been out of the house in 25 years. When Atticus asked, had she any friends, she seemed not to know what he meant. Then she thought he was making fun of her. She was as sad, I thought, as what Jem called a mixed child. Did you ever, at any time, go on the Yule property? Did you ever set foot on the Yule property without an express invitation from one of them? No, sir, Mr. Finch, I never did. I wouldn't do that, sir. Tom, what happened to you on the evening of November 21st of last year? Mr. Finch, I was going home as usual that evening, and when I passed the Yule place, Miss Mayella were on the porch like she said she were. It seemed real quiet like, and I didn't quite know why. I was studying why just passing by when she says for me to come there and help her a minute. Well, I went inside the fence and looked around for some kindling to work on, but I didn't see none, and she says, no, I got something for you to do in the house. The old door's off its hinges and fall's coming on pretty fast. I said, you got a screwdriver, Miss Mayella? She said she sure had. Well, I went up the steps and she motioned me to come inside, and I went in the front room and looked at the door. I said, Miss Mayella, this door look all right. I pulled it back and forth, and those hinges was all right. Then she shut the door in my face. Mr. Finch, I was wondering why it was so quiet like, and it come to me that there weren't a child on the place, not a one of them. And I said, Miss Mayella, where the children? I say, where the children? And she says, she was laughing sort of, she says, they all gone to town to get ice cream. She says, took me a slap year to save 7 nickels, but I done it. They're all gone to town. Well, what did you say then, Tom? Well, I said something like, why, Miss Mayella, that's right smart of you to treat them. And she said, you think so? I don't think she understood what I was thinking. I meant it was smart of her to save like that and nice of her to treat them. I understand you, Tom. Go on. Well, I said I'd best be going. I couldn't do nothing for her. And she said, oh, yes, I could. And I asked her what, and she says to just step on that chair yonder and get that box down from on top of the chiffer robe. Not the same chiffer robe you busted up? No, sir, another one. Must as tall as the room. So I'd done what she told me, and I was just reaching when the next thing I know, she grabbed me round the legs. Grabbed me round the legs, Mr. Finch. She scared me so bad I hopped down and turned the chair over. That was the only thing, only furniture disturbed in that room, Mr. Finch, when I left it. I swear 'fore God. What happened after you turned the chair over? Tom, you're sworn to tell the whole truth. Will you tell it? What happened after that? Answer the question. Mr. Finch, I got down off of that chair and turned around, and she sort of jumped on me. Jumped on you? Violently? No, sir. She hugged me. She hugged me round the waist. And then what did you do? Sorry, then what did she do? She reached up and kissed me on the side of the face. She says she never kissed a grown man before, and she might as well kiss a black man. She says what her papa do to her don't count. She says, kiss me back, black man. I say, Miss Mayella, let me out of here. And I tried to run, but she got her back to the door, and I had to push her. I didn't want to harm her, Mr. Finch, and I say, let me pass, but just when I say it, Mr. Yule yonder hollered through the window. What did he say? Something not fitting to say, not fitting for these folks and children to hear. What did he say, Tom? You must tell the jury what he said. He says, you goddamn whore, I'll kill you. Then what happened? Mr. Finch, I was running so fast I didn't know what happened. Tom, did you rape Mayella Yule? I did not, sir. Did you harm her in any way? I did not, sir. Did you resist her advances? Mr. Finch, I tried. I tried to without being ugly to her. I didn't want to be ugly. I didn't want to push her or nothing. Tom, go back once more to Mr. Yule. Did he say anything to you? Not anything, sir. He might have said something, but I weren't there. That'll do. What did you hear? Who was he talking to? Mr. Finch, he was talking and looking at Miss Mayella. Then you ran? I sure did, sir. Why did you run? I was scared, sir. Why were you scared? Mr. Finch, if you was a black man like me, you'd be scared too. Mr. Link Deas then announces, I just want the whole lot of you to know one thing right now. That boy has worked for me for 8 years, and I ain't had a speck of trouble out of him. Not a speck. So there's one man who's willing to stand up for Tom Robinson. Then Mr. Gilmer is going to cross-question Tom Robinson. Halfway down page 202. Go ahead, Mr. Gilmer. You were given 30 days once for disorderly conduct, Robinson? Yes, sir. What did the black man look like when you got through with him? Oh, he beat me, Mr. Gilmer. Yes, but you were convicted, weren't you? It was a misdemeanor, and it's in the record, Judge. Witness will answer, though. Yes, sir. I got 30 days. Robinson, you're pretty good at busting up chifferobes and kindling with one hand, aren't you? Yes, sir, I reckon so. Strong enough to choke the breath out of a woman and sling her to the floor? I never done that, sir, but you're strong enough to. I reckon so, sir. Had your eye on her a long time, hadn't you, boy? No, sir, I never looked at her. Then you were mighty polite to do all that chopping and hauling for her, weren't you, boy? I was just trying to help her out, sir. Well, that was mighty generous of you. You had chores at home after your regular work, didn't you? Yes, sir. Well, why didn't you do them instead of Miss Yule's? Oh, I'd done them both, sir. You must have been pretty busy. Why? Why what, sir? Why were you so anxious to do that woman's chores? Well, it looked like she didn't have nobody to help her, like I says. With Mr. Yule and 7 children on the place, boy. Well, I says it looked like they'd never help her. You did all this chopping and work from sheer goodness, boy. Try to help her, I says. You're a mighty good fellow, it seems. Did all of this for not 1 penny? Yes, sir, I felt right sorry for her. She seemed to try more than the rest of them. You felt sorry for her? You felt sorry for her? The witness realized his mistake and shifted uncomfortably in the chair. But the damage was done. Below us, nobody liked Tom Robinson's answer. Now, you went by the house as usual last November 21st, and she asked you to come in and bust up a shipper rope? No, sir. Do you deny that you went by the house? No, sir. She said she had something for me to do inside the house. She says she asked you to bust up a shipper rope. Is that right? No, sir, it ain't. Then you say she's lying, boy? I don't say she's lying, Mr. Gilmer. I say she's mistaken in her mind. Didn't Mr. Yule run you off the place, boy? No, sir, I don't think he did. Don't think? What do you mean? I mean I didn't stay long enough for him to run me off. Well, you're very candid about this. Why did you run so fast? I says I was scared, sir. If you had a clear conscience, why were you scared? Like I says before, it weren't safe for any black man to be in a fix like that. But you weren't in a fix. You testified that you were resisting Miss Yule. Were you so scared that she'd hurt you? You ran, a big buck like you? No, sir. I was scared I'd be in court, just like I am now. Scared of arrest? Scared you'd have to face up to what you did? No, sir. Scared I'd have to face up to what I didn't do. Are you being impudent to me, boy? No, sir. I didn't go to be. For some reason, Dill started crying and couldn't stop. Quietly at first, then his sobs were heard by several people in the balcony. Jem said if I didn't go with him, he'd make me, and Reverend Sykes said I'd better go, so I went. Ain't you feeling good? Dill tried to pull himself together. Anything happening, Scout? Asked Mr. Linktius. No, sir. Dill here, he's sick. Come out under the trees. Heat's got you, I expect. It was just him I couldn't stand, Dill said. Who? Tom? That old Mr. Gilmer doing him that way, talking so hateful to him. Ah, Dill, that's his job. Why, if we didn't have prosecutors, well, we couldn't have defense attorneys, I reckon. I know all that, Scout. It was the way he said it made me sick, plain sick. He's supposed to act that way, Dill. He was cross. He didn't act that way, Dill. Those were his own witnesses. Well, Mr. Finch didn't act that way to Mayella and old man Yule when he cross-examined them. The way that man called him boy all the time and sneered at him and looked around at the jury every time he answered. Well, Dill, after all, he's just a black man. I don't care one speck. It ain't right. Somehow it ain't right to do him that way. Hasn't anybody got any business talking like that? It just makes me sick. Well, that's just Mr. Gilmer's way, Dill. He does them all that way. You've never seen him get good and down on one yet. Why, well, today Mr. Gilmer seemed to me like he wasn't half trying. They do them all that way, most lawyers, I mean. Well, Mr. Finch doesn't. He's not an example, Dill. He's the same in the courtroom as he is on the public streets. That's not what I mean, said Dill. I know what you mean, boy, said a voice behind us. We thought it came from the tree trunk, but it belonged to Mr. Dolphus Raymond. He peered around the trunk at us. You aren't thin-hided. It just makes you sick, doesn't it? Mayella is a complex character. I think as readers we understand why she has reacted in the way that she has, but her lies will cost Tom his life. We might feel sorry for her, but we cannot excuse her choices. Prejudice is a complex concept. We human beings look for ways to classify other people. If it's not according to color, then it's according to income or address. It can be according to religion, to level of education. We are all guilty of prejudging others. Mayella is in the lowest of white categories. Even Atticus has referred to the Yule family as trash. But Mayella feels that she's better than Tom, simply because he has a darker skin to hers. Tom Robinson comes across as an honest and reliable witness. He is in an impossible position. He knows that he won't be believed, no matter what he says. Mr. Gilmer does what any lawyer is paid to do. He defends his client using whatever means are necessary. I hope that all of you who are considering a career in the legal profession will think deeply about this. Is it ethical to do what Mr. Gilmer is doing? What would you have done if you had been appointed to defend Mayella's version of events, especially when the death penalty is the likely outcome of a guilty verdict? Children are honest. They don't yet understand that society operates in shades of grey. I find Dill's response heartwarming. It's right to be upset by the injustices in the world. It's a pity that we lose that sensitivity as we get older, as we become more jaded, more cynical by our experiences in life. You'll find that it is the people who cannot stand injustice who are the real agents of change in society, those who refuse to look away, those who are willing to call out prejudice when they see it. Where do you stand in this debate? Are you a dill? I hope so. For homework, I want you to answer these 8 questions in your notebooks. Don't be put off or confused by the wording in question 1. If you have any difficulties, ask a classmate for help. When you've finished your answers, let me know, and I'll email you the model answers. Don't forget to update these pages as well with the extra information about the trial that you've got from these chapters. That's it for this lesson. Make sure that all of your work is up to date before the next lesson.